Welcome back to Next Scene Podcast, the podcast taking on pop culture one scene at a time. As always, I'm your host, Sean German. Unfortunately, my co-host Brian will not be able to join us today, but in his place, it's a Christmas miracle. We have joining us a very special guest. It's Niall McGowan. Thank you, Niall. Welcome.
Hello, listeners. I'm listening. Oh, that doesn't sound. It sounds weird. Hello. It should have been hello Seattle, but I'm assuming people outside of Seattle will be listening to this as well.
Yes. Hello, Seattle, and other cities and towns and villages, hamlets.
I'm surprised that never came up on the show at any point. Frasier saying hello, listeners. I'm listening, because it seems like it would be an instant thing you trip over.
Maybe they figured it out. Like, yeah, that doesn't really work. So don't say that ever.
Yeah. Hello, listeners. I'm Seattle. It's like no.
And so, listeners, as you may have guessed, I've asked you here to join us to talk about season 6, episode 10 of the series Frasier, and the title is "Merry Christmas, Mrs. Moskowitz."
Yeah.
And although it alludes to Christmas right there in the title of the episode, we do get some allusions to Hanukkah, and this is another episode that showed up on my web searching of lists of great and loved Hanukkah television episodes. So we'll see if there's any. Is there any Hanukkah spirit in this Frasier?
As soon as you set that up, I'll be like, I wouldn't count this as a Hanukkah episode. Like, it's got a lot of Jewish stuff going on in it, but none of it's in celebration of Hanukkah is the thing.
Okay,
so.
well, we'll save that. We'll get into we can get to that question later. Yeah. But before we go that far, first I want to know is what is your history with Frasier in general, and your history with this specific episode? Is this something you've seen before?
Oh yeah. Anyone who knows me knows that like Frasier is one of my favorite things in the world. It used to be part of because I grew up in the 90s, and so the show started in 93, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was part of the Channel 4 Friday night lineup for like most of the decade. And so what would happen is like my brother, who was like 10 years older than me, he would go out on a Friday night because he was a teenager and he was going out with his friends and stuff. They'd get me to tape everything that was like worthwhile. So I'd have to sit in Friday nights was my job to like record Friends, and then like an hour later record. Friends was on at 9, and then at 10 Frasier would be on, and then like Beavis and Butthead or something that would be on later. So I had to stay up and make sure I hit the record button for him and stuff. And then all the faff in between was left out, like though. I think it was like. I don't think The Nanny was recorded as well, but there was something like like the Billy Crystal show or something, which is like that. We don't need that. We don't need that.
There's some filler in between.
Yeah, and just it's always stuck with me. It's just like when I went off to university and like was living with other people. We get in cable TV or whatever, and on the comedy stations, Frasier was always on, and so I just watch it all because it's like, oh no, I love the show, and then. I'll just watch it like ad nauseum, and then I just have friends who are the same thing. It's still on Channel 4 every morning. It's like 3 episodes of Frasier. Like no, I don't watch terrestrial TV anymore because it's the age of streaming, and I just like I'm not paying for that. Like I'm paying for streaming services, so why would I watch terrestrial TV? But anytime I'm back at my dad's house, I can't help but note that every morning Frasier is still on Channel 4, and because that you just kind of dip in and out all the time. It's fantastic, and I do distinctly remember this episode from when I was a kid. I guess it would have been like 11 or 12 or something when this one came out, because it's like 98 or 99 this one airs.
Yeah, so this aired December 17th, 1998 here in the States. And, I don't know how long it takes to make it over.
Yeah, it probably would have been a couple of months. Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah.
So I would have been old enough to kind of get like, I distinctly remember like breaking up when Niles comes in dressed as Jesus and stuff. I distinctly remember certain jokes being like, this is fantastic. I completely, because when you're a little kid, a lot of Frasier would go right over your head. I was just sort of like enjoying the acting because they act in such a overly theatrical way most of the time, so you can still kind of get the jokes even if you don't understand them. But as you grow older, and that's the thing, like if you grow up with the show, you come and revisit it time and time again. you start to realize like how layered and sophisticated the writing is and stuff, and it just sort of grows with you in terms of like, oh yeah, this is a really it's it's a magnificent show just in terms of just everything about it. It's, like literally, it is one of the greatest sitcoms of all time, and it's just particularly the first like 7 or 8 seasons, is like the scripts sparkle so much. Of course, like every great show, there is a fall off point, but like yeah, and this is like this episode comes like 2 weeks or something. It's like 2 episodes away from The Seal Who Came to Dinner. Which, if people don't know that, that's like one of the greatest episodes of any TV show ever. It's just a classic. Frasier and Niles decide to have a party and go like that. It's one of those setups.
Yeah.
But then it's just one of those things like, yeah, that episode is like literally every line is a masterpiece kind of thing. So, and in this episode too is like, I was a bit trepidatious about some of it because of like, should they be playing in this pool a lot of the time? Like things could potentially rub people the wrong way. But we'll talk to why I think it gets away with it. But it's still so. It's this episode in particular is also doing the other classic Frasier thing of there's been a misunderstanding and now they have to maintain a lie. And like that's every couple of episodes each season, there'll either be Frasier and Niles decide to do something together, and then that causes a whole big rift and absolute insanity, or it's just like, oh yeah, this guy thinks I'm gay, so just pretend I'm gay for like 2 minutes, it'll be fine. And then all of a sudden, that's the whole episode, is them trying to hide a thing and stuff, and scrolling from this way to that way, or this person's in love with me, but I'm in love with this other person, and then 20 minutes of just dodging around with that material. So
it does operate on several different levels where there's sort of the broad, almost like Three's Company-esque slapstick broad, the misunderstanding. But then there are the subtle lines in the writing, as particularly Niles got some great lines in this that can fly by pretty quickly. And then you've got, kind of sets up almost like a classical comedy of manners type thing. And then you've got the, one person walks out the door, kind of leaves stage right, and then someone else comes in left at, the exact moment. Whereas, if they had seen each other, everything would have blown up, but it just kind of keeps the tension rolling as people come in and out of scene.
I don't think you get it. Maybe because I'm not watching enough, sitcom comedies anymore. I feel you don't get this kind of stuff anymore. I remember there was a recent episode of What We Do in the Shadows where they were trying to get like the young, like baby Colin Robinson into a good school or something, and then that began a whole thing of like, oh, let's pretend that we're together, and then began a whole thing of like trying to keep various lies going and stuff. I remember being so refreshed when I watched it. I was like, oh, that was like an episode of Frasier. It was just so scrambling around and trying to hide the farce, basically. I felt like, I don't think we get that enough anymore. Of just someone like, I told somebody a thing, and it's all going to be within this one room, and it's going to be people going in and out. It's basically a stage play of just like trying to maintain, and then the thing keeps getting layered and layered and layered in terms of how many levels of deception are going on and stuff. And
Right. Yeah, and I'm noticing that just going through and watching these, watching sitcoms and kind of summarizing and writing up the action for the podcast, and say just note like in an episode coming up, we'll be talking about an episode of Friends, and there's something like 15 different scenes. Ooh. As they flash back between different locations and everything. And this is once you take out commercials and credits and everything, we're talking about basically like 21 minutes.
Yeah.
And they've got 15 different scenes in 21 minutes. And this has got basically 5. Like the whole second act is one long scene. And I guess there's a little bit, they cut back and forth between the living room and the kitchen in Frasier's apartment. But it's basically, let's see, like 8 minutes, 13. There's basically like 13 minutes of this episode. Like more than half the episode is just one room, one scene.
Yeah.
Ongoing.
You have that the classic magic Frasier kitchen where people can go in and having secretive conversations that everyone would be able to hear, but somehow, even
Yeah.
though it's just a wide open door and they're just standing like 5 feet from people, nobody's overhearing everything.
No one. Yeah. It's a pocket universe. And like she says, yeah, no one in the living room has any idea what's going on in that kitchen, except when they need to, except when like smells need to carry out and so forth. But yeah, so let's get into this action. Speaking of Frasier, so the episode opens on Frasier and Roz are shopping. So they're in a department store. And Frasier mentions that he's taken control of decorating for Christmas this year, and he's ordered a fully decorated Christmas tree to be delivered Christmas Eve.
Yeah, yeah. Well, should also mention too, like, because they had the opening,
Yeah.
the opening title, get
Mhm.
Frasier, and then they changed it to the Seattle Sky Needle as a Christmas tree, which I thought was
Yes.
kind of an odd one. Because I thought with the theme of this one, they might have turned it into like a menorah or something, like because I think they've done the Christmas tree one in previous seasons, so I kind of thought like
Mhm.
they would have mixed it up a little bit, but
Yeah, it could just make it a single candle.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
would have been
Uh,
something, but
But
they
yeah,
didn't.
I thought this was shocking to me though. Like getting a Christmas tree delivered Christmas Eve was like some people usually have them up like mid-December or thereabouts. Like Christmas Eve is like unless Fraser's very much the type of he'll pay through the nose for it. He'll pay like
Yeah.
thousands of dollars for these decorations. But they'll go up and then by like I'm sure he'll keep like traditional 12 days and then it's over. Get them back down again.
It's over.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I like at that point, it's like decorating for Halloween on October 30th. It's like, well, as soon as Halloween's over, then it's time to take those down. Like you're really doing this for one day. Whereas, yeah, most people will do it early. And, some people, I think in the US where, we've got Thanksgiving, which is, strictly a holiday in the United States, but that's the fourth Thursday, November. And then like that weekend, either the Friday or Saturday after is, a traditional time when a lot of people go out. And then you have your tree up for a whole month. You can enjoy it. But it seems like, yeah, to get a tree the day before, it's going to be up for one day and then it's over. It does seem silly.
Although, because I'm a big Halloween fan, so I was happy to see I was out earlier today and still seeing pumpkins out in people's doorsteps. I'm like, Ezra, keep the spirit alive. Keep it alive all year long.
It's not, yeah, it doesn't have to be just one day. You can have that spooky spirit all year round. But yeah, not Frasier. No, he's and not the joy of decorating. Decorating a tree. I mean, maybe that's more of a when you have children that enjoy that. But that's that's half the fun right there.
Yeah.
But
Although
nope,
there was
not,
a little leap of joy in my heart though, because like I've seen this episode a bunch of times, so like I don't have like an encyclopedic memory of it or anything. And so like okay, Christmas episode, maybe get ready for some Freddy action like Frasier's son. And then when they mentioned like Frederick's not coming this year, it's like oh thank God. I hate that kid so much.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Freddie is off spending Christmas with Lilith, and Frasier has spent some time. He spent 20 minutes looking for, as Roz says, that candle holder thing, which is he's shopping for a Hanukkah menorah because Frederick is half Jewish.
Yeah.
Which
they had
is odd, and this.
So we should mention the one of the great first lines of Lilith is taking him on a tour of ancient ruins, ancient Egyptian ruins. Like, I can't imagine having to spend Christmas with a load of old bones. Like, yes, as I said, she's taking him to the ancient ruins.
Yeah, so it's a good line, and I thought I thought it was odd that he would be shopping for a menorah, unless he's like taking advantage of like the after Hanukkah sales. So, as we've discussed in previous episodes, the Jewish calendar is a lunar calendar, so the dates of holidays will move around relative to the Gregorian, the traditional solar calendar that most of us use. So in 1998, Hanukkah started on December 13th. And so I guess, they don't tell us exactly when this is, but I don't think they tell us. But I'm getting the impression that this is later, that this is closer to
I think
Christmas.
they
Like Hanukkah
mentioned.
is well over by this point.
I think during the main guts of the episode, where they're in this
Say.
his apartment, they mention it's Christmas Eve. So
Yeah, they do say that the later scene when Helen and Faye
yeah,
stop by the apartment, they're flying out on Christmas Eve. And I
so
guess there have to be at least some time
yeah,
for
it could be an estimate maybe December
them to be.
23rd because it might be like oh yeah, literally the next day or something. But
Yeah.
yeah, although yeah, it is maybe Frasier is just terrible at planning holiday stuff because it feels like if Freddy's going to be way off on tour with Lilith, how's he going to get this menorah to him? Like
Yeah.
it feels like really like oh he's going to give it to him after he gets back when Hanukkah's over. Like it seems very poor. But then if you watch previous Christmas episodes, you do learn that Frasier is terrible at buying presents for his kids. So he says there was a whole episode where like he tries to buy him a whole science kit and stuff, and Martin ends up buying him. It's called like the Afro Laser Robo Geek or something. It's like so all the kids wanted Frasier, and then it turns out that's exactly what Frederick wants the whole time. And stuff.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. Well, we see an example of that here where he tries to buy a gift for Roz, and it's just, she picks up a sweater and looks at it, and then she goes off to shop in another part of the store, and then he's instantly turning to the clerk saying, can you get me this sweater?
yeah.
And then later we find out she didn't like that sweater at all, or at least she didn't, not that color.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Maybe it might be a thing in Seattle, or maybe just in America in general. But I imagine if I said to a store clerk, "Oh yeah, that woman I was just in, can you?" And then I think they would be like, "I wasn't paying attention to what you were doing. Like,
Yeah.
who are you talking about?" I'm just folding the clothes, man. Like I'm not paid to nosy in your conversations.
Yeah. This is definitely something that exists only in sitcoms. Your real life clerk. I don't need your life story. I don't know who you're with. I don't know what you're going to do with this sweater. I just want to know that you're going to pay for it.
Yeah,
That's really my only concern.
totally.
So Roz wanders off. Fraser is trying to surreptitiously buy her a sweater. I guess he asked for a different size. When the clerk returns, Roz has also returned, and so Fraser has to play dumb. We're starting with the comedy of manners already with the secrets, and Fraser's got to complain, insist he knows nothing of this sweater.
Yeah, he is the unluckiest liar who's ever lived. Like anytime he tries to do anything, like any slight untruth, always instantly backfires on him somehow. Even if it's for the forces of good, it still manages to come and bite him in the ass.
Right. Which makes me wonder of how good of a psychiatrist is this so-called Dr. Frasier Crane.
I mean, that's always one of the main problems of the show is the fact, like, I think, to be fair, Niles does bring it up to him many times of, like, pop psychology. So people ring in to Frasier's show, and he basically gives them generic platitudes and then refers them to another psychiatrist all the time. And all of his advice is very basic, and you're kind of like, do you really need a Harvard and Oxford educated like psychiatrist to dole out this advice? It's... And then the later seasons, he does go back into private practice and stuff, and Niles, I think, quite rightfully points out, like, well, the advice you're giving out isn't anything really all that special. Like, you're not a psychiatrist really in that regard. You're just sort of giving out like, well, I guess it could be this or it could be that kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's realistic in the sense that, my impression of any doctor, psychiatric, medical, or otherwise, that has a television show or radio show, at that point they're more media personality than than physician that's helping people. It's culture and entertainment at that point. It's not medicine.
It seems because everything he seems to do seems to last about 3 minutes maybe on air. Whereas you think like maybe if you were supposed to listen to the actual show, you would have like an entire hour with someone really grilling them on their problems. Which might be more of an excuse, like, okay, well, at least you're kind of getting more into it there. But, the therapy takes years with people. So,
years.
Yeah, it's the whole. But then, a lot of Frasier just being basically nothing but a media personality and very, very up his own ass about it is a lot of the charm of the show as well. So, that's, they probably thought it through and were like, that's the whole point.
That's the bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then this strange woman intersects and kind of saves Frasier, pretends that the shirt is or the sweater is for her niece, and asks Roz for her opinion. Says, "Oh, my niece is about your height. Is this the right size for you? And what do you think of this color?" And of course, Frasier has it all wrong. Roz is like, "Nope, this is not the right size," and yeah, that color is ghastly.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, Picking up someone who can do lying a lot better than Frasier, apparently as well. So
Yeah.
was off without a hitch.
Yeah, and then conveniently Roz leaves again, so then Frasier can thank the woman for saving him and complete his purchase of the sweater that I'm sure Roz is going to recognize when she receives the gift and opens it up, and
Yeah.
we'll figure out this ruse pretty quickly.
There's of course a great line about Roz goes in and complains about the line, and people are like, is everyone lined up for nose hair clippers or
No
something?
clippers.
And then I think that Frasier sends her back in with a kind of like, oh, go get some for Noel. I know we can bet that he doesn't have any or something. Some a little slight indication that like, oh, this guy clearly has a nose hair problem.
Apparently, yeah. Someone should just tell him. But I guess yeah, nose hair clipper as a gift is sort of a less confrontational way. It's a hint.
Yeah, that's one of the things I really love about Frasier as well, though, is that him and Roz, both that and the Lilith burn he did earlier. They both laugh at it. Like it's a show that the characters know how clever and how funny they are, and they'll stop and laugh at their own jokes and stuff a lot of the time. So,
yeah, just like humans. They're TV characters. They're just like us. Hollywood celebrities. What do they know?
Do they know stuff?
I don't know. Let's find out. So it turns out. So the woman who we found out, her name is Helen. So she helps out Frasier buying this gift, this sweater for Roz, and in return, there is something that he can help her with, and that is getting a date for her daughter.
With a handsome, rich doctor.
A handsome, rich doctor. Well, he's at least one of those things. I mean, so supposedly, I guess we can suppose he's, if not outright rich, at least well off. I mean, he's got that radio money.
And also, he does seem to be very, very wealthy. It's another one of the weird things with Frasier. Like, how is he earning so much? He seems to be like a millionaire. Some episodes he's spending so much on like random knickknacks and stuff. They're like, are you really getting all this in just like a radio psychiatrist salary? Like, is Bulldog Briscoe earning the same amount of money? Because he does. It doesn't seem like he is.
Yeah, is local radio? I don't know. Is he syndicated? Maybe he's making money, around the country while he talks to Seattle.
They always do every so often, though. Clearly for the purposes of like making the joke. They kind of always allude to the fact that like maybe Frasier's ratings are in the toilet, or he really needs to have the show or something. So it kind of feels like the show is like on its last legs, and every time they talk about like, well, Doc, I gotta talk to you about the this, that, or the other. It's like, and it's I think syndication and things like that are kind of one of his ultimate goals. But I don't know if he ever gets there within the show's lifespan.
I would hope not, because it's much funnier if he doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no comedy in people being happy and achieving their goals. That's no good. We want miserable, awful people to laugh at. And speaking of miserable, awful people, we cut to the next scene with Niles, Frasier's brother, and they're in a bar and they're awaiting the arrival of Helen's daughter, who Helen has set up on a date with Frasier.
Well, not a bar, Cafe Nervosa, I believe.
Cafe.
Yeah. The classic Frasier. I always remember distinctly because me and my friend Anthony, like both are. He's more into Frasier than I am, and they opened in Derry, like down there, a couple of miles down from my hometown, a place called Cafe Nervosa, and we were like, holy crap, we've got to go there. We got to see what it's like. It was horrifically disappointing because we were going in expecting it to be like pretentious ass coffee place, and it was serving like bowls of stew and stuff. It's like, there's no way Frasier Crane would go into go on a daily basis to order his coffee in a place that serves stew. It just would not happen whatsoever.
Was it a Frasier themed cafe, or was it just a coincidence on the name? Is that
I think they just took it for name recognition and then made no effort to try to replicate the vibe of Cafe Nervosa inside. Like
there wasn't?
the thing, like you
Okay.
go into like the central perks and stuff around the place. You go and it's like, yeah, it's the chairs. It's the whole setup of Friends. Like it's recreating that place. But this was just going in, but like it's just called Cafe Nervosa. Just sucker and idiots like me who are like,
Yeah.
oh, I guess it'll be like the place in
Uh,
Frasier.
mhm.
It'll be like exactly
Uh,
like that defunct sitcom that got that ended 15 years ago.
yeah, they really got their finger on the pulse of pop culture there. So back to the real Cafe Nervosa. Faye Moskowitz, daughter of Helen, shows up, which seems backwards. Like Faye is such an old name,
Hmm.
which I realize like these are not children. These are not spring chickens we're talking about here. But even then, like, do you know anyone under 80 named Faye?
I know a lot of people who refer to themselves as fake. I know it's a big thing within like even I think it's like FAE Fae is like a fairy of sort.
Right? Yeah.
I know people who are into role play and that kind of thing. Like not in the sexy way, but like what do you call it? Like they go out and dress up in kind of medieval garb and stuff like that.
Like LARP, live action role playing.
Exactly. Yeah. So I know people who like that's their whole shtick,
Okay.
and so they refer to
Yeah.
themselves as being Fae.
Faye.
But then that's not their
But
name.
that's
They're always saying that I
yeah.
am a. They should be saying I like. Well, I guess the correct grammar term for it be is no, I am Fae, much as like I am Jewish rather than I am a Jewish wouldn't make any sense, that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, I'm Faye. Yeah. No, so this is Faye, Faye, which is a little different than the fairy Faye. FAE, I think that is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually have an Aunt Faye,
Oh.
um, who is, but like a great aunt, like my grandmother's sister. So she's probably in her 90s
Woo.
at this point. Yeah.
Mm.
Certainly a little bit older than Amy Brennan here.
Yeah.
Brenneman, who is playing Faye Moskowitz.
Mm. I did have to double check because the fact that her mother is setting up with a rich, a rich, handsome doctor, and I was gonna look at Kelsey Grammer. It's like, that guy, he must be like near 50. And Amy Brenneman, I was like, is she not like maybe like 30 odd in this? So it's kind of like it's a bit weird that her mom's setting her up with a guy who could be potentially so much older. I don't know. Maybe that might be a thing. It's like, well, he's got a good secure job though. Like, I don't, what matters the age? They're both adults.
Yeah, he can provide.
But look,
Yeah, so Kelsey Grammer is, just to jump in real quick, Kelsey Grammer is 11 years older, or like 10 and a half years older than Amy Brennan.
Yeah.
At that point, like she's late 30s or mid 30s. He's 50
Yeah.
or late 40s at this point.
Yeah. I mean, that's always the thing with most sitcoms, I think. But like every girlfriend Jerry Seinfeld ever had in that show was probably about 10, 12 years younger than him as well.
Yeah. Yeah. By showbiz standards, that's good.
Yeah.
That they're only 10 or 11 years apart. So why not? But he is I guess, handsome doctor. I don't know.
I mentioned it several times throughout the show. I'm like, I mean, maybe to some people,
I will mention, so Kelsey Grammer was not the writer on this episode, but he was the director. So he directed this episode himself. So I don't know if as director, if he got to, play with the script and maybe add some of those lines about the handsome Frasier Crane.
I think maybe at this point, like 6 seasons in, they're like, well, yeah, just put it in for him. That's keep him happy. But this is great though, considering this is like the height of the show, and like this is a great episode. So kudos to Kelsey Grammer for directing this. Like, I guess he's been there literally every day of the show being made, so he probably knows exactly what to do and whatnot. But like, he does admirable work in this.
Yeah. It's not bad. Yeah. It's pretty good.
Well, those always stories.
So
I'm not too sure if it was in this season. I know he had like massive alcohol problems though. And there was people. I remember seeing interviews with the cast saying like, yeah, he would be. There's times he would come in, and he would be like stinking drunk on set, and he'd be like collapsed on the sofa or whatever, and then just have to get on with the show. So, as soon as they'd call action, he'd stand up, deliver the Frasier dialogue perfectly, just like as if it was nothing to him. And then as soon as they call it cut, he'd collapse on the sofa again, and just be back to being a drunken wreck. So I don't know if it was around this time. If he's directing episodes, I can't imagine that would be the case. But again, it's a guy he played that character so well for so long. He's like, even when in reality, I'm off my face, I can snap into playing Frasier like it's nothing.
Right, he knows that character. Yeah, because at this point, you're 6 seasons in, and I kind of wonder how much directing does it take? Is the show basically running itself at this point?
Yeah, and because he played Frasier in like what 8 seasons of Cheers or something as well. Like he was in that show for a long, long time too.
So yeah, even before. So yeah, so he knows this character well. Apparently, he can do it in his sleep or drunken stupor, as it were.
Yeah.
I guess as long as you can get the work done. But so this scene in the cafe serves as a bridge. So it sets up 2 things. One, it introduces us to Faye Moskowitz, who we'll be seeing more of later, and also sets up sort of the B plot with Niles and Daphne. And so Daphne needs some help with her Christmas pageant. Her musical director has dropped out, and Niall enthusiastically volunteers to help.
Yeah. Oh, it's classic. There's so many instances in this issue or this episode of just been like classic Frasier scenario of just Niles loves Daphne and is really awkward about it. Like, so when she's looking over at Frasier flirting with I keep wanting to call her Judging Amy, but Amy Benjamin. But she's doing the whole thing like, oh, you can always tell young, new love when they're like this and that, and like Niles is doing all the exact things next to her as he's looking at her, and then at one point she's like, oh, stop fidgeting, and he's kind of corrects himself because he's been fidgeting.
Well, and at that point, she's like, oh, can tell the awkward body language. He doesn't he doesn't know what to do with his hands, and she's talking about Frasier, but we see, Niles. When she says stop fidgeting, is she talking to Frasier or is she talking to Niles?
Oh no, I think she's like kind of hissing at Frasier, like he won't hear her.
Yeah,
but she's frustrated, like, oh, stop fidgeting because you're going to put her off. But it's just that Niles thinks, because he is very clearly fidgeting, that she's talking to him.
Yeah, he is very much fidgeting. So that's funny.
Should have mentioned though, like briefly, Amy Brennerman. She would have been Frasier always got in pretty big guest stars, so she would have been like a couple of years off Heat at this point. Like, Heat, big Michael Mann classic movie. She was like Robert De Niro's love interest in that movie. So it was a big old role. And like Hollywood actor. I don't know if this was around the time of Judging Amy being on as well. So it's not a bad.
So Judging Amy would start the following year in '99. And she would play the titular Amy. So she is, I guess she's pretty big, and is about to get much bigger with her own show. But she had done a fair number of, movie. I mean, she was in Casper in '95 with Christina Ricci, then Heat, Fear in '96. So she had some pretty sizable theatrical film roles before breaking into TV here.
She actually one of the few Frasier love interests last multiple episodes as well. Actually, she does appear after this one, up until the end of the season. I think then there's an episode where Frasier can't choose between her and Virginia Madsen. He's trying to juggle 2 women at the same time, and wouldn't you know it, Sean? Frasier's not very good at juggling women. He's terrible.
I think I saw this episode of Brady Bunch. Yeah.
Like, of course, there's classic scenarios of like, oh, he's got her over for, she slept over and they're having breakfast in his robe the next morning. But then his other girlfriend comes to the door. What's he going to do?
The merry mix-ups that occur.
Oh, exactly. Great. That's all brilliant.
But Amy does come back, which kind of makes sense. It would, or not make sense, but makes me feel better about all the effort they go into lying to Helen here. It'd be like, to make all that fuss over a one night stand or something that didn't become a regular dating thing. Yeah. It wouldn't make any sense.
Also, should point out too, because
Yeah.
they do hit it off so distinctly. Because she has a lot in common with Frasier, including she's the pastry chef at Le Cigar Volant, which is
Yeah.
again, if you watch Frasier, Le Cigar Volant is like his hangout. Like it's beyond Cafe Nervosa. If he's ever going out to dinner, it's always Le Cigar Volant that he mentions. It's, apparently, I was always assumed it was like some sort of pretentious French thing that didn't mean anything. But apparently, it means the flying cigar, and it's actually a reference to UFOs. Even like in French, like
Okay.
because they always hear reports of UFOs have been like, oh, cigar shaped object, so they're like, oh yeah, le cigar volant, the flying cigar. It's like
The flying cigar.
it seems so weird for Frasier. It's like, oh, you would
Oh,
go to a place named after a UFO, but I guess if you pretentious it up and give it a French name, of course he would.
yeah. Yeah. You put it in French, and yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it works out well. So then we cutting to our third scene of this opening act. We are now in, go back to the apartment, Shay Fraser
Yeah.
or Shay Crane. And we find out Faye is stopping by. She's on, so Faye and Helen, I think is it Miami? They're going to Florida for Christmas, and it's Christmas Eve, but they're going to stop by. They're going to stop by on their way to the airport because they just can't get enough of Frasier.
They're trying to get in some frequent Frasier miles.
Yeah, frequent Frasier models.
But we should in the previous scene too. It did end on the great joke of because it was a blind date they were set up on, and Frasier then says to Niles like, "Oh yeah, could you give me a couple of minutes and then give me a phone call?" Basically, as an escape route.
The escape call.
Yeah, and then Frasier gets that call and he goes like, "Oh, I'll sign those papers later." And sorry, judging Faye says instantaneously. That was an escape call, wasn't it? And he's like, "Oh no!" And then he's like, "Yes." How did you know? And she gets a phone call as well. So it's one of those nice, like, didn't have to hit the thing too hard. It's like you understand what happened, what's going on here.
Yes. Yeah, we see. So Frasier and Niles there. Daphne pops in, and then Martin comes in. Where's a good place for Rudolph? So kind of kicking off that that conflict between Martin and Frasier. Martin wants to do his traditional, Christmas decorating, and Frasier is strangely insistent because I don't think this apartment is particularly decorated in a way that screams like someone did all this on purpose and someone else changing things around. It's like, yeah, I mean, I guess there's some there's some pottery, there's some ceramic, there's work of arts, some works of art on various surfaces, but as a whole, it's very beige. It's a lot of light wood and tans and grays.
It could be though, Sean, if he didn't have his father's goddamn chair in the center of it, throwing everything off. If he had a proper chair he wanted in there, you'd see how it ties together. But
I'm sure it's the chair throwing everything off.
It's not just the set designers of network TV in the 90s, but like, I don't know, like, but fancy apartment. This looks fancy, right?
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, yeah, it's an apartment. It's lovely. So Faye arrives and enters, and fortunately they set it up where Faye comes in just a few moments before Helen, so she can spot the Christmas wreath, and kind of wait, aren't you Jewish? And I mean, this wreath is barely, and I think I'm being generous by giving it barely Christmas, unless you consider all wreaths to be Christmas, because it's green and it's got like silver ribbon or silver streamer, but it's
very easily.
I don't know, to me, it doesn't scream Christmas.
Yeah, very easily could have just been passed off as like this. No, this is a normal. I have this out all year round. This is just general decoration.
Yeah.
Like it's not a. It's there is nothing particularly Christmassy about it. Like maybe it had like a little bit like a red and gold ribbon at the bottom or something. You might, but like it just seems like that could be any bit of shrubbery you just put up on your wall.
Yeah, I mean, if there was like particularly green and red or like the Christmas colors, if there was like red holly or something, that would make it Christmassy. This is just, I like to have some green, some reminder of the natural world in my otherwise completely sterile living space.
Yeah,
But yeah.
I was thinking, because it's always the great what if like Faye and her mother had arrived together and she had saw that wreath, it would have just got everything over with very quickly, and she probably might have been just like,
Yeah.
oh well, the indications is that she would have been bothering Faye about it constantly. But at least then it would have been,
Yeah.
they've been able to process it by themselves or whatever. Yeah, I know it's going to be on the flight and whatnot, but it would have got things over with instead of the farce that has to occur afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, and this is like, I mean, if I was questioning Frasier's credentials previously, this is, he is way past the needle of normal activity of like, yes, let's lie. You're a full grown woman in your at least late 30s, maybe 40s. Let's lie to your mother and I will pretend I'm Jewish because that is a thing that normal, healthy people do.
Yeah. It's like, you're a fully qualified psychiatrist, and you can't just say to this woman, well, you've clearly got some issues that you need to work through with your mother. And like, it's.
Yeah. And I kind of understand where Faye's coming from, where she's like, I think, she recognizes, yes, we shouldn't do this. I shouldn't lie to my mother. There's no reason we have to hide this. But, yeah, we're about to jump on a plane where we're going to be stuck sitting next to each other for the next 6, 7, 8 hours, how long it takes to fly coast to coast. And she just doesn't want to deal with it in the moment. So I kind of understand where she's coming from. But I also know that that's still not healthy.
Yeah.
There's still no reason that Frasier should go along with any of this and just saying, no, I'm not Jewish. And if it comes up, I don't need to volunteer that information. But if your mother asks, I'd be like, yes.
Frasier's been through 6 seasons of him trying to lie about things already. You think he'd be like, I should know from my own personal history. If I attempt to do this,
you kind of figure out
this is going to go horribly wrong.
All right. So, yeah. So we've got, we've got Frasier and Niles. We've got Martin. Then we have Faye, Faye and Helen coming in. And then finally, Eddie enters the room with a Santa, full decked out. He's got a hat. He's got a little coat. He's, full Santa costume to throw everything out. And now it's on. Now we've got 7, I think my count was up to 7 characters at this point. And the various lies and deceptions that are going on.
It's just the fantastic delivery of Frasier seeing Eddie, but Helen doesn't. And just get out of that coat already.
Coat. So I'll take that as kind of the end of Act 1. And so let's pull back a little bit. And I'll ask you, Niall, do you think does this episode qualify as a true Hanukkah special?
Not at all. No.
Not at all.
No. It's barely a Christmas episode even. It's just like it happens to be set on Christmas Eve because that's more like to prompt the comedy of like, well, how do you we need a scenario where Jewish people and Christian people doing very Christian things would be happening at the same time, But there's barely, beyond the menorah at the beginning, there's scarcely a mention of Hanukkah throughout the episode. Like, there's no... Faye and their mother don't seem to be particularly in the middle of celebrating it. It could be literally any time of the year for them, quite frankly. So
right.
I wouldn't say, like, it's not... It'd be... not to go into controversial territory, but it's it's a Hanukkah special in as much as Die Hard is a Christmas movie. In that, like, it's set at the same time, but like thematically, is there anything relating back to Hanukkah going on, either textually or subtextually? It's not particularly, no.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, and I was kind of, I maybe surprised isn't the word. I guess maybe disappointed, like that this shows up on those those web lists of kind of favorite or best Hanukkah episodes, because like you said, it doesn't. Well, the mention of Hanukkah is strictly to Frasier buying a menorah for his son, and
that's only really there to set up the plot as well, because it's more like, well, that wasn't there, and the reason Helen assumes he's Jewish is because he was buying a menorah. So that's really the only, from a screenwriting standpoint, that's only really there to be like, well, we need to set up a reason why she would assume that Frasier is Jewish. And there you go. That's the only, it's a Hanukkah special in terms of like, we set up this one thing as a cog to get to the next to spark off the rest of the episode, which is it's great, but it's not like particularly. It's an episode you can watch during the festive season, but like you could also watch it in the height of summer as well. It doesn't really matter.
Right. And yeah, and like you said, even as a Christmas episode, Christmas is just sort of the artifice or the MacGuffin that causes the Cranes to have all these signs of not being Jewish around the apartment that they then have to hide from Faye. But it could just as easily be, Easter. Maybe Faye sees Frasier buying a Seder plate for Frederick's Passover Seder, and then assumes Frasier's Jewish and shows up, and now he's got to hide. He's got Easter eggs and rabbits and everything all around the house that he has to hide.
100%.
So,
yeah. I should ask though, Sean, while we're asking questions, because like you're not hosting a Frasier podcast, so like what's your history with Frasier? Like you're a bit older than me, so like were you like hardcore Frasier in the 90s, or was it more of a whatever?
No, I was kind of done with Frasier by the time his own show came around.
Oh, wow.
I was so I think around the time when you were growing up with Frasier, I was growing up with Cheers.
Yeah. He's like, I'm sick of this guy, but in the friggin' weeds with Frasier Crane for like 10 years already.
What years was Cheers on? So I'm a little bit older than you.
I think Cheers is like 1980 onwards, I want to say. Like it's really early 80s.
Yeah. I know when I was in university, Cheers was big and kind of one of the 84 to 93.
Oh, it's actually much later than I thought. I could have swore it was like the cusp of the 80s, like Cheers, but yeah. So.
But then then Frasier picks up like right afterwards, 93 to 2004. So when I was kind of growing up, I was big into Cheers, and then by the time I was in university, it was kind of towards the end of the run, and at that point, it was in syndication. So. It wasn't just the new episodes on once a week. It would be on, once or twice in the evening, kind of run, the reruns, the older episodes. So, I was a big fan of Cheers and watched that. By the time the Frasier show came along, I was into like the first couple seasons. I think by the third or fourth season, and certainly by the time this episode came out, I was out of it. I could kind of see the way it was going, particularly the Niles and Daphne relationship. I'm like, yes, that's, it's funny when when the character doesn't get what they want. That's funny. Happiness is not funny. Fulfillment is not funny. Yeah. Like it may be good in real life, but it's not funny. And I saw the way this is going that I'm like, okay, eventually Niles and Daphne are going to get together. That's going to have a happy ending. And while it's nice for the characters, as the viewer, it's not funny to me.
Yeah.
So, and also, I don't know if I appreciated kind of the sophistication of the humor. Just watching this episode now, going back, I'm like, I had a few laughs, and I appreciate the lines a little bit more than I did in sort of my 20s or 30s.
Yeah. I'd say because I did watch Cheers a lot when I was a kid too. But I think it's such a different beast. Cheers is great in its own way, and it is very clever in its own way as well. But like Frasier's so, I think it's a lot sharper. I think they're packing in a lot more jokes, and they just got it has that air of like it's mocking pretentiousness, but it's also written by very intelligent people who know what they're writing about and stuff. So like even like the name of this episode, like Merry Christmas, Mrs. Moskowitz, is in reference to Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, like the movie from, kind of an art house movie from the 80s with David Bowie and Tom Conti, which is about like Bowie and Conti are prisoners of war, Japanese internment camp in World War II, and the whole film's about the clashing of cultures between the two of them. So it's a layered reference in the title, and that kind of thing. Frasier would do that a lot. So it's like, oh yeah, so when you come back to it and the more you revisit it, you realize, oh yeah, these guys really, they were kind of Frasier educated people, mocking their own pretentiousness. Like whereas Cheers has a real vibe of like it's just good. It's a good time for everybody. Like it's just it's good wholesome comedy where I think Frasier just always had that little bit more of a an edge to it for me personally. But yeah, I can't
Yeah, I
believe
mean,
when I was
maybe.
sitting there with like wide eye taking in like was the greatest sitcom of all time. There was like Sean over in America with his long grungy hair, listening to Nirvana, going that Frasier's so lame, man.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's worth going back for a rewatch because I agree with you. Like, there is a lot of just going by this episode, and I don't really remember much from other episodes, much specifics. But yeah, I do see some of that intelligence and wit in the writing
Mm.
that I probably didn't recognize the first time
Yeah,
around.
yeah.
So,
I would highly
uh,
recommend going through.
all right.
I think you'll be pleasantly. If you're not, if you come back and come like, oh, it was I watched all 11 or 12 seasons, 500 episodes of Frasier, garbage. I hated every second of it, but I did it just to prove you wrong.
But I did it just to prove you wrong.
It is
Yeah.
true. Like, the common complaint
That's
is, as you sort of alluded to there, as soon as Niles and Daphne hook up, it's over. And that is the show goes on after that for a while, but it is a real and for exactly the reasons you're talking about too. And it's basically too they changed Daphne's entire character because they have to have her in it more, and so she starts off as a real weirdo, and by those seasons, she's just kind of written to be like a normal woman, and you're like, oh, where's all the weird psychic stuff and all this the tales of her bizarre family and all that? They kind of just throw it out the window and make her very bland and stuff. And but oh well, yeah. That's not to do with this
well.
episode.
Yeah, that's neither here nor there. So getting back to here, let's return for scene 4. It's our first scene in or Act 2 in Frasier. So we've got Helen, Faye, and Frasier sitting around, kind of chit chatting, and we don't know how long they've been here, but I guess they've got a while before their flight, so they've got time to relax.
So it goes on throughout the episode
So
too. Like I called the airline. It's like, why are people calling airlines? Like, what is then I called the airline back, and they also moved up the flights. Like, would the airline just move the flights willy nilly on people like that? And then, I just happened to call them. Thank God, and I found out this.
Well, yeah, I guess that's is that something that happens? Because I know, like whenever I fly and it gets delayed, they wait till like the last second. Like it's a minute before the plane's due to take off, and then suddenly, oh, it's an hour delayed.
Yeah.
Like I like how often do they know far in advance? Well, they may know, but they actually would announce like, oh, this flight's delayed, like enough time to give you, far enough in advance that you could decide, oh, I'm not going to head to the airport just yet.
One thing I know as well is that it really really bugged me, is that like there's a time a couple of years ago I had to get a flight, and I remember checking like the app, and they said like this plane's delayed by a couple of hours. And I was like, oh, great, so I don't have to check in and all that business. Like, no, you still have to check in and be there. Like at the time, you just have to wait in the airport.
Yeah.
Like they kind of forced you basically. No, we have to keep things running smoothly on our end, so we're gonna act as if it's not delayed. And then like so you just do everything as you would have done. I was like, why? Like, that's horrifically annoying. But that might have just been that one particular airline, though. To be fair, but I remember it bugged the crap out of me because it's like I could have had the extra hours of the day. And like, no, you got to be there. You got to be in the airport. So,
yeah. The one little trick I figured out is if you could figure out where your plane is coming from. Like if it's not the first flight of the day, if you can kind of work back, you go, okay, so like my flight is going to be at this gate. All right, let me look at so that's departures. Let me look at arrivals. What flight? What flight is landing at that gate, and then did that flight take off on time, and is that flight on schedule? Because I've there's been times where like my flight, they say like, oh, on time, everything's going according to plan, and then I look and I see like the plane I'm getting on left was 2 hours late leaving the previous airport, and I'm like, there's no way where they're gonna get
unless
here
they got like friggin' Jeff Goldblum on there with the telepod. There's no way. There's no chance that's happening. But it's even more infuriating that when you're in the airport and they're like, "Oh yeah, there's a 3-hour delay," and you're like, "So can I go and come back?" No, you got to stay here and wait for that thing to show up. I'm like, you already checked in. Yeah. We already have you in. We did the friggin' security check, so you have to stay here. It's like, God damn it.
Yeah. Well, and they'll change because they'll say, "Oh, it's a 3-hour delay," and then they'll be like, "Oh no, we're taking off. Delay's over."
Yeah.
And if you've wandered off, you could, then they won't wait.
What if you're waiting for Frasier's delicious brisket that he's making?
Wait for that brisket that takes a while. And I know from brisket, it can take a while.
I did feel.
But yeah, so then
talking about Jewish cooking though, like I did feel a bit out of my own element coming in for this particular episode because, like, well, I'm not Jewish, but I do know Batman's frequent guests, Lauren Ashley Carter. She's very proudly Jewish. And that's something like, oh, but, we've been. I was kind of like, oh, maybe we should ask Sean want her to come on for this because, like, she spends her days now just cooking like Jewish breads and stuff, and her Instagram is just filled with like, this babka I made, and look at this and look at that and stuff. And it was like, she used to live like one city over from me, and she never had any of these cool breads. And now she lives in America again. And I'm like, God damn, like, can I not get any of this stuff? Post it to me. Like, oh, I don't want to come around for some of this delicious Jewish bread. Like, no, live in a continent.
Well, it's funny you should mention that, Niall, because we have a special guest who actually is joining me live in the studio, and she has brought an assortment of baked goods for all of us who are here to share.
Except me.
Lauren, welcome to the show.
I did get some. I at least got some freshly baked cookies earlier, and then I ate one, and I feel it's cracked a filling in my mouth, which is the thing. I'm like, oh God damn it. And Sean, I've been having trouble with my teeth lately, so it's like I can't afford this. What is happening over here?
Yeah, I know that the tale of the teeth that you've been through now.
Yeah. I'm assuming you'll be doing the "It's Always Sunny" Christmas episodes as well.
That's actually not on the list, but there's still room. The 8 slots for the 8 Nights of Hanukkah are not completely filled yet. So yeah, who knows? There's still a chance. So listeners, hang on. You never know. So speaking of tales, so Frasier tells the tale of his bar mitzvah where, the rabbi was there, the cantor, the moil, just to show there were no hard feelings.
I don't think of Frasier as
but I want to get
cultured man though. Like, well, I'm surprised he can't lie better about this stuff. Because, like, well, surely you must have. You've looked into so many different religions around the world. Like, you got all this art from like different countries and stuff. Surely you must have a kind of. You would know that the moil's not part of the freaking like all the bat mitzvah ceremony and stuff.
The fact that that you know what a moil is, but you thought it would be at your bar mitzvah is he's not as good as Niall, and I want to get to it because Niall jumps on this.
Oh yeah, I love his
away.
As soon as Frasier's like, you pretend you're Jewish, he's just okay, he instantly gets into what's happening. And Niall might know that he's in a sitcom. Like Frasier doesn't know he's a character in a television program. Niall might know the way he accepts this premise so quickly and then buys into it. And he says, Frasier says, well, at some point you've got to find time to tell Dad. You mean Papa? I think now again maybe because Niles he's been through it so much with Frasier. So I think even in the last episode with Faye, when Frasier's trying to juggle the two women, I remember there's a moment where Niles shows up and he's just like, well, so I thought we were going to play squash. What's happening here? And he sees like Faye's in there in Frasier's dressing gown. She leaves the room, and then Frasier's other girlfriend comes in, and he instantly goes, "Oh, I'm up to speed." Okay, and so he instantly knows like what's happening. He's like, oh, "Okay, classic Frasier."
Classic Frasier on another one of his things. Yeah.
Just apparently for this episode, David Hyde Pierce got like his 3rd Emmy nomination for this episode specifically, which I thought was like, I mean, he's good in it, but like, I don't know nowadays. His stuff would be particularly the following scene where he just leans in hard to the Jewish stereotyping. This is the kind of bit of like, oh, I don't know if you would put this in a show now because it's like he's the waspest man alive, Niles Crane, and yet he's going into like, oh yeah, so all the stuff about the Jewish wine, all everything he's doing is like, oh, answer everything with another question, like all that business. It's full blown. It's stereotyping, and it's like, well, so thankfully I do know that this episode was at least written by a Jewish guy. So I desperately went to check because it's like, if this is written by like some agnostic ex-Catholic or something, we're in bad territory here. But thankfully, no. Do you know who wrote this episode, Sean? Because I was stunned at the man's credentials.
No. Who wrote this one? So it was we've got what, three writers: David Angel, Peter Casey, and David Lee
But I think
in the credits.
this episode
But
specifically was written by, because I think those guys might have been like, I don't know, the head writers of the whatever that works. But apparently this episode was written by a guy called Jay Kogan, who is
Jay, okay,
Kogan, who is Jewish.
yeah.
And this guy, Jesus Christ, I find it because he was also Emmy Award-winning writer. Wrote for Frasier quite a bit. But one of his other things, which makes him like, he's like the Bill Finger of The Simpsons, this guy. You know, in terms of like Bob Kane gets all the credits, and over in The Simpsons, like, oh yeah, Matt Groening, blah, blah, blah. And you find out Jay Kogan, he wrote the episodes Homer's Odyssey, Like Father, Like Clown. So it's Krusty, you know, and his Jewish, is extremely, you know, Jewish rabbi dad. Krusty Gets Busted. First episode to feature Sideshow Bob speaking with Kelsey Grammer's voice, of course. Bart the Daredevil, and Last Exit to Springfield, which is like the power plant goes in strike episode.
Oh,
And from writing those episodes, he created the characters of Mr. Burns, Smithers, Dr. Hibbert, Krusty the Clown, Lionel Hutz, and like it's just so he's just like, yeah, this guy, and they're like, yeah, most of your favorite Simpson characters came from this guy Jane Kogan, and what thanks does he get? He never gets anybody thanks for it whatsoever. So, yeah, so he's a real hero, this guy. Like,
wow.
As you tell, being of the Jewish faith is important to him because, you know, Krusty. I think in Krusty Gets Busted, beyond Kelsey Grammer showing up for the first time, it's also the first mentions of Krusty being Jewish, and then of course there's, you know, the entire episode with his dad and stuff is like, it's all about Krusty's Jewish heritage and you know, and similarly to this episode too, like problems between people pursuing things that aren't, you know, their traditional Jewish parents don't like, and the problems that would come from that and stuff, you know. So he's he's still working the day. Apparently he was on the iCarly revival. But then left because him and Miranda Cosgrove had a falling out over artistic differences, which is like, so, but now I'm kind of like, was iCarly that good that like they got this guy on? Like, I just always dismissed it.
Yeah.
Maybe it was actually an amazing show, and I just never gave it the time of day.
Yeah, he also was working on the Punky Brewster revival as well. Oh.
They have a falling out with Punky Brewster as well.
I don't know the story there, but I guess that makes sense. And I imagine, that makes a lot more sense for a lot of these lines that Niall has, and of course David Hyde Pierce has to deliver them. But
the thing is, the unfortunate thing is that I think David Hyde Pierce is still very much not Jewish, so it's kind of like, I can enjoy the scene, but it's also where we're like, it's, you know, it's funny, but I feel bad for laughing with it because it's like, oh. I mean, I guess okay because a Jewish guy wrote it and stuff, and all the, you know, Amy Brennan herself is Jewish, as is Carol Shelley playing the mother. So it's like, I guess they're all okay with it. So okay.
Yeah, and I was okay with that as a Jewish person. You know, I was I took a little bit of exception about the line about the wine, but even the way Niall does it, like, oi, what if she's expecting Jewish wine? And it's like, well, I guess apparently Jewish wine is regular wine plus 2 scoops of sugar. Yeah. 2 like heaping spoons. But although that's, you know, I think for many, if not most people, when you say, you know, a kosher wine or a Jewish wine, they think Manischewitz, which is typically very sweet. I mean, it's even for, you know, it's sweeter than grape juice as wine. But there are other Israeli wines and kosher wines that are not as sweet. So that is a bit of a stereotype that is not entirely true, but
and also this Tanaki does too. Like Frasier going, oh, that tastes dreadful. He's like, perfect. You know, like it's just saying like, all Jewish wine is terrible. Like,
so I could take a bit of an exception to that, but other than that, I think it's and there's one other thing that'll come up later that was not insulted by, but just is not, you know, not accurate to the you know, Jewish experience.
Yeah, because most of Frasier has dated so well. There is the odd time you come up with, like, because even like all the episodes where they dealt with, like, you know, people thinking Frasier was gay and stuff like that, and there's always that's all dealt with very, very deftly and very delicately. We can still show it today, be like, yes, it's all, you know, it's not punching down. But sometimes I guess it's not punching down because it's written by a Jewish writer, but it also feels a bit like it's othering in a weird way because Niles is so instantly on to like, well, this is exactly how Jewish people act, right? And it's a bit like, well.
Well, yeah, but I mean, he knows the terminology. He can kind of sound Jewish, but then it's at a very superficial sort of level. Like when he's asked to make a toast, and he throws out
Yeah.
l'chaim, mazel tov, next year in Jerusalem, which are all three things that a Jewish person would actually say. But I don't know if they'd say them, all in a row like
Yeah,
that. But
yeah. This is reminding me of recently I was watching
that was funny.
when I watched House of Gucci with my
Mhm.
friend Fabio. He happened to show up, and Fabio himself is Italian. So you're watching and you're going like
Mhm.
Jared Leto's like, oh my god, he's going so big, and Braun was like, hey, it's a me, like really crazy Italian accent and stuff. And all the critics are going like, yeah, he's so over the top. It's such a caricature of Italians. And my friend who showed up, who is Italian, was just like, that's my uncle. He acts exactly like that. He looks like that. That's the way
Yeah.
older Italian men act. Like, so he's doing everything he's doing is fine.
Mhm.
It's like I don't know if people writing about it going like, this is horrible, you can't do that, or just a bit like putting up their protectors a bit like it feels like this is very stereotyped. But then when an actual Italian person comes on and goes like, no, that's all perfectly true.
That's
Does
yeah.
that give it the A okay then? Like, what's the
That's
deal?
That's the way it is. Well, and when Niall does his thing with, how do you sound Jewish? You just answer every question with a question.
Mm-hmm.
That's yes. that exchange when he goes into that is very
Yeah.
Jewish. And it's like what? What do I have to explain
Yeah, yeah.
everything? What I should give you an example? You're saying I'm not being helpful? That's
Yeah,
yeah, perfect. You've hit it.
yeah, and that really stuck in my head too, of
Yeah,
it
I'll
being
say
like,
I'll,
what's a kind of Jewish cadence, and I don't know to my detriment or not, but my mind will always go to like always answer everything with another question. So,
Yeah, and you just have to. I don't know enough about linguistics to get into all the technical details, but you have to raise your voice at the
yeah,
end. So it's like, what? I should give you an
mm,
example. Just answer question with a question, and just kind
yeah,
of you put that audio question mark at the end of every statement that turns it into a question. And yeah, you just do that.
well, because
It's sort of a Semitic version of the Socratic method.
yeah, that's kind of a little bit
But
of
sorry,
acting.
you're saying?
No, I was just gonna say it's like a little bit of like acting genius from John Mahoney. Because he does that, but he does it
Yeah,
very badly. Like I'm sure it's deliberately. But he's
yeah,
like, "Oh, I don't know. Do I?" Like it's so like that's kind
yeah.
of what you're supposed to do, but and he is doing the cadence, but it's like it's way off as well. It just doesn't land properly. Um, but no, oh,
Yeah,
such a
yeah.
massive loss, John Mahoney. It was like I remember him the day he died, and like it felt
Yeah.
as if like
Oh,
a proper weight landed on my chest that day. It was like, oh, not Marty, no.
not Marty. Yeah. Um, so yeah, I let's jump ahead a little bit in the action and get to that point where I said there was one thing that they do that doesn't ring true to me, um, and it's so Daphne has come in. She said someone has dropped out of the Christmas pageant, so she needs Niall's help. He leaves, and then later comes back dressed as Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, he's filling in the man who who got sick or ill. Was doing a song from Jesus Christ Superstar, and that's the part that Niles has
I
to
was
fill
thinking,
in.
slipped in the
Um,
shower. Funny for a man who can walk on
yeah,
water.
yeah, yeah. But like Frasier freaks out, and like with the Helen can't see you, but that like with all the Jews in show business, like that's a very a very Jewish thing would be, well, one, Jesus was
Yeah,
Jewish, but to be playing Jesus in a Christmas pageant, like I have, I have an aunt who is very Jewish but also very musical, and she's in a lady singing, not really a choir, it's a smaller group, but she's got a quartet or a quintet of people that she sings with, or women that she sings with. And they'll do Christmas concerts, they do Christmas carols. Every big Jewish singer you can think of, from Neil Diamond to Barbara Streisand, has a Christmas album. White Christmas, written by Irving Berlin, born Israel Berlin, Balin, Jewish, Russian Jew. So yeah, Jews are very entwined, very involved in the entertainment business, and along with that, it's not like they've said, we're taking Christmas
Yeah,
off.
yeah.
So yeah, Christmas albums, Christmas songs, Christmas movies. There's nothing more Jewish than a Christmas
Mm,
pageant.
mm.
So yeah, I mean, I wasn't, I wasn't insulted. I don't feel like they're, like the equivalent of blackface or
Yeah,
anything. But it just didn't ring true to me that like if they really knew Jews, they would know. No, you don't have to
yeah.
hide that you're dressed as
Mm.
Jesus. Just that would fit in perfectly with everything else you're trying to do here.
If I were to play devil's advocate to that, you could say it's because like Frasier and Niles don't know that because they're not Jewish. So he could
Because they're
assume,
not
oh,
Jewish.
this is going to be a problem. Whereas if he was actually Jewish, he would know, like, oh, that's not an issue whatsoever. But it's his panic of like, oh yeah, this must be a disaster. Um, you know, I think I could still make it work for me personally, at least, but keeping that in
Yeah,
mind.
yeah. I mean, I guess it does fit in with the characters. They wouldn't know this, and then of course you've got to. They need something to kind of ratchet up the tension. So it's like the initial lie is kind of going over very well and doesn't seem to be an
Mm.
issue. So it's like, okay, we've got to somehow push it to where they have to continue to that tap dance to keep the
Yeah,
ruse
yeah.
going.
I think
Which and of course, oh,
no, that's
sorry,
just
go
what I was
ahead.
to say because it everything again though. I love how the show was written in terms of just like the minor trying to there's always business of like go off and give people a tour of the bedroom, and then the Christmas tree shows up, and then has to be put in the bathroom, and then
Yeah.
it goes back and forth and stuff, and all
Yeah, I was just going to mention, that the Christmas tree showing up is that other, that other little piece, that other, fly in the ointment to step up the tension, and then of course it pays off with Helen. They're on their way out the door. They're about to, they can see the finish line. They're about to successfully carry it off this deception, and then just before she leaves, oh, let me go to use the powder
mm.
room, and opens the door, and there's Jesus standing in front of a Christmas tree.
I have to say too, as a Frasier fan, he needs to get rid of that powder room because that has been his downfall
Yeah.
in so many episodes. Where he's nearly gotten away with something, but I just need to use the powder room. It's always something happens there. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Just yeah, or just move it so it's
uh,
not right by the front door.
yeah. I think like the
Yeah.
yeah, when I was a kid, I remember distinctly that joke really landing with me because I think I only had I think maybe because I growing up in Ireland, all we had was Catholics, Protestants, and occasionally you get some, but not my hometown. There was like everybody was white. It was just there was very very little cultural diversity between, but except those two religions. And so my understanding of what Judaism was basically gleaned from South Park, and like knowing that Kyle was
Oh.
Jewish, and then that was a thing, and I was like, oh, so what's the
Mhm.
big deal? And then World War II and history class, I'm like, okay, so. But so I just knew enough to know, the Jewish don't believe that Jesus was this that and the other. And so thankfully at the age of 12, that joke still really landed in terms of like this is. I mean, I think even do it without it being like even without the context, it's just basically all you need to know is like this: he should not be seen in this outfit, and this Christmas tree should not be here. And then just that moment of opening the door and him standing there with his nasal spray, like
Well, yeah.
he couldn't even be standing looking dignified. He has to be like inhaling a nasal spray at the exact moment as well. It's so good. Again, that's such a classic Frasier climax as well. Just everything just builds up masterfully to the one big joke payoff, and it's just like, yep, that's the high point of the episode. Now we're all in the denouement, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Again, and once again about the great writing. So it kind of everything kind of figures in some way, from the menorah to making is the reason Helen thinks. Thinks Fraser's Jewish, and then you got the sweater, and then you've got the conversation that Daphne and Niles have at the cafe about the pageant, like that. That suddenly comes back in with the
Yeah.
Jesus, and yeah, it's just everything builds up into this. This one moment, this big payoff.
The fact that too, they're repeating
funny.
like some of the same jokes too, because he had obviously the get out of that coat already, but then like when Niles comes in dressed as Jesus, like, Jesus, look at the time, like. Oh, so good. It's so good,
Yeah,
John.
yeah, so good. So good, so good. Um, so let's take our second break. And my next question for you, Niall, is: do you think? And we've touched on this a little bit, but let's we can address it directly. Um, you know, does this episode capture the spirit of Hanukkah, whatever that means to you,
Uh,
in terms of the spirit of Hanukkah?
Unfortunately, I have to confess I wouldn't know the spirit of Hanukkah because I've never. I know two Jewish people, and one of them is because the
Mhm.
lady I mentioned, and I only know her about her Judaism through online presence. Never been,
Mhm.
although I suppose I get Audra and stuff. They're Jewish as well, but I've never know the only person I know who's Jewish in who I know in real life is not practicing. So I couldn't tell you. Like it's a thing I'm actually very interested in because like I know it's such a massive thing from seeing American TV programming talking about Hanukkah and stuff like that. Um, unfortunately, I've never encountered it myself, so I can't really speak to that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'll have to have you over sometime. I'll make a brisket. I'll make a
Oh, totally,
kugel,
totally,
and
yeah.
we can get
I
into
know a
it.
lady who can bake
But
amazing
yeah,
bread apparently as well. I'll see what I can do.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I don't. So I'll say so. The spirit of Hanukkah. I mean, Hanukkah can mean lots of different things to different people. I mean, the main story is about the battle um, with a Greek king and just well, not the destruction of the temple, but the ransacking of the temple in Jerusalem, and they only had enough oil to keep the eternal light that is supposed to be burning all the time. They only had enough oil for it to burn for one day, but miraculously, it kept burning for 8 days till they could have new oil consecrated for the temple. Um, so. So Hanukkah is associated with a couple different things. It's lights with candles and with fires. It's the festival of lights, and then it's also associated with miracles. That miracle of the oil lasting or burning for 8 days. And yeah, I think this fails. Like there isn't. I mean, even the Christmas tree. I mean, at the very end, we get some lights after we see. Martin has been allowed to take over on the decorating front, but this tree that Frasier's ordered is there's no
Yeah.
lights, so not Hanukkah in that fashion. There's no miracle. I mean, there is a happy ending on it, and I guess it's a miracle that anyone puts up with Frasier, um, with his lies and his schemes and his shenanigans. I mean, maybe that's the miracle, but yeah, I don't think there's even with the turn and the happy ending. I don't feel there's any miracle. There's certainly no lights. There's very little Jewishness.
Yeah.
Um, Other than
Yeah.
Niall. But yeah, I think out of 1 out of 5, I kind of give this a
Yeah.
1 in terms of Hanukkah
Mm.
episodes, which kind of even with my aforementioned prevalence of Jewish people within Hollywood and the entertainment industry, there still aren't a lot of good Hanukkah
Yeah.
episodes, and it's a holiday that I guess doesn't really lend itself to a special episode as much as Christmas
Yeah.
does.
I mean, like
May
you
explain the
explained the story
disparity.
of Hanukkah there. Like the only time I've ever heard that presented on television, that story is Ross Geller as the holiday armadillo, and just the classic. These people were
Armadillo.
called the Maccabees.
Maccabees.
That's the only time I've ever heard that story. In terms like we wouldn't because it's the culture is just so not big over here, particularly what wasn't in Ireland. So like when we
Yeah.
were doing like religious history and stuff, we'd never bring up stuff like that. So yeah. It was up to me now though. I'm an adult with access to the internet, so I should be able to go and look these things up myself, I guess.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, that's something I can do. I can do some research. I know that there is um, in England. There's a history of a Jewish presence and a Jewish culture within the English
Yeah,
culture,
yeah,
but in Ireland, which is a different
yeah.
country and a different island, what's the history of Jews in
Just the,
Ireland?
not the, I know that the big
That's
unfortunate
something
thing
I
is
don't know.
because of the talk of Jewish people in England at the minute is always mired with anti-Semitism as well. Unfortunately, massive controversies within the Labour Party, accusations of anti-Semitism running rife. It's crazy because the Labour is supposed to be the good party, and then you find out like, oh my god, of course they're
Yeah.
all freaking bigoted assholes.
Oh.
It's just the political scenario over here is so exhausting. But But yeah, Ireland's just got his own sort of like, yeah, just I don't think they would have anything against Jewish people, but I just don't think that it's just very like whatever, to do whatever you want, like
Yeah.
that kind of vibe.
I think they've got enough trouble with the
Yeah,
Protestants. They don't know if they've got time to be worried about
yeah.
Jews. Like
Once we finally
they've
get
got
rid of all
bigger
the
fish to
Protestants,
fry.
then we can start on on that.
Then we can start hating the Jews. But first things
Mm,
first.
mm.
Yeah, Ireland's got
Yeah.
other issues going on there.
Well,
Certainly.
this whole this
So
whole section in the kind of climax of the episode, though, where you get this business between
yeah,
A and her mother, because this all feels very like, I'm assuming this is Jay Kogan writing from a true place of like he saw his mother and his sister do this. If it's this thing, I don't know if Jewish fathers would do it with Jewish sons, or if it's a particular female kind of way of acting, or to have this, instant vicious argument that just really, really erupts, and then for it to instantly just boil right back down again, and just to sort of move on with the day as if nothing's happened. The only other instance of it I can think being in a thing is I always thought it was very impressive in Curb Your Enthusiasm, where like Larry David will have roaring arguments with his friends, like literally be ripping their throat out. And then 2 seconds later, he's like, "So we going golfing tomorrow?" Like, yeah, I'll see you then. Like they just got to get back to it. It's like, is that a Jewish thing that Jewish people are just able to sort of really get in heavy into an argument and then just be like, "No, it's okay," because it's nothing's taken personally. It's just like we did that thing and now we're over it.
yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's a Jewish thing, but it's happened. It's kind of a thing in my family, and my family is Jewish, so yeah, maybe it is.
Is that why
it is kind of
Brian's not
strange. Like, and
here,
it struck
Sean?
me
Is
like
because you and Tim had a blowout? He shows up at the end
yes,
of the episode. Like,
and,
no,
and
no,
the,
we're
the
good now.
second we're finished recording, we'll make up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. You found me out. Yeah, and this kind of struck me like weird at first, but then I'm like that. It kind of gives that these characters have a life outside of what we've seen. I mean, this is a full-grown woman and her mother, so they have a long-standing relationship. So it makes sense that they have that they could have some issue that we don't see. We don't see the buildup. We don't see the decades of resentment slowly building, and we just see the culmination where it all comes up to a head. But yeah, that totally fit with my family and the way they argue. Like I totally buy that it could be, at each other, yelling at one moment, and then they're crying and hugging the following moment, and then it's oh, let's go get something to eat.
Yeah. I think it's kind of presented in a positive light too, because it's like obviously Frasier Martin and they have their attempt at it, and it's disastrous. I feel they can see the benefit of it. They're like, oh yeah, so they just got it all out in the open. It happened for like a minute, and they're just back to being good again. Like it's like, so maybe that's the best way to go about things,
Right.
instead of keeping everything like squabbling and pent up and all this business. Just let it all come out.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I have my notes. I have sob, cry, hug. Well, we should go. Which is the kind of very abrupt wrap up.
And even to do with the mother, they kind of diffuse the situation slightly mid argument, because Frasier Martin like, maybe we should go, and they're like, oh no, sit down, we're almost done. Like,
sit, we're nearly done. Yeah, sit.
I mentioned too, of course, that actress is Carol Shelley, who I was surprised to learn is an English actress. She's from London, so and she Russian Jewish heritage herself. The big thing about her was she was Lady Cluck in Disney's Robin Hood.
Yeah, Lady Cluck.
And she was also in the original Broadway run of The Elephant Man back in '79. And she seems to really have stuck around with The Odd Couple, because she was on the original Broadway production of The Odd Couple with Art Carney and Walter Matthau, is in the movie with Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau, and then went on to be in the TV show. So I've never seen the Odd Couple TV show. I'm sure it's a classic in America, but like I don't know. So I don't know who played the Odd Couple in the TV show, but I know the movie. So,
yeah, and do you know? Does she play the same character on Broadway? Because she plays the same character in the show that she had played in the film.
So, yeah. I mean, a bit weird if she. Oh no, she was playing Felix Unger in the. She was one of the Odd Couple on the stage.
Oh, she was one of the couple. But yeah, so the television show with Tony Randall and Jack Klugman, and that's sort of and that Felix Unger, that's I guess that's like a Niles Crane before Niles
Yeah, no,
Crane.
very much so. Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Um,
but yeah, so I didn't necessarily recognize her right away, but she'd done quite a bit. You mentioned Robin Hood and the Aristocats, and a bunch of other voice stuff for Disney. So yeah, she's had quite
yeah,
a
we
career.
lived up to 2018 too. So yeah, she lived the life. And,
Yeah, good for
but
her.
yeah, apparently was a big
Yeah,
deal on stage too. As he was like a real Broadway darling. So I'm sure there probably were people watching this who were like, "Oh, of course I know who that is." Some of the theater nuts might have recognized her, but um, and
yeah.
meanwhile I'm still there going like, "It's Judge and Amy. There she is."
It's judging, yeah. So yeah, so judging Amy and Lady Cluck, they they hug, they make out, they or not make out, they make up.
Things took a real severe
That's a
turn at the
different
end of
thing.
the episode.
Whew.
I don't think that's a Jewish
They
tradition,
make
quite
up, they
frankly.
hug,
But
yeah,
they got with your mother, but
and I mean, I guess and I mean, Frasier could kind of play it off if he was a really good psychiatrist. He could kind of say like, "Well, this was my plan all along," and you could see how it worked. But then, yeah, so then Martin and Frasier kind of attempt to replicate the miracle reconciliation that they just witnessed, and they aren't quite ready to
yeah,
pull it
yeah.
off.
The climax is because the two of them end up just like crying their eyes out, and they're like, "What happened? They were hugging by now." Like maybe we should go to Mrs. Shapiro to talk us through it. Oh, she's out of town.
Yeah,
Oh no! I think it's Martin's. Oh no! They really sealed it for me.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah. So there's a sweet ending, and then we get a little bit of coda. I guess and the original you don't get this with streaming or downloads. In the original airing, there would have been a commercial. Then they come back from commercial, and we see, we've got the tossed salad and
yeah.
scrambled egg thing going, but we see Rudolph. Martin's Rudolph is hung up with that wreath over the fireplace, and his nose is flashing. And then we see what I think of as a more traditional Christmas tree, with tinsel and the various colored lights, not kind of the sterile store bought thing that Frasier had hired,
Yeah. Uh,
and Eddie with his little Santa
I say
costume.
too, as a big Frasier fan, the end credits bits always the worst part of the show as well. Like, I had no idea that was over here. They'd just go straight into the end credits. I had no idea that in America you would have to sit through a commercial and then come back. If I was over there, I would have been out. Like I was like, oh, don't stick around for the credits. Like as soon
Yeah,
as it goes to that commercial,
yeah,
you can haul ass because the end credits. The end
yeah.
credits joke are always. I feel maybe even the writers are like, nobody cares about just they need something. Just throw something together.
Yeah.
So
They've tuned out at this point. We know this is coming after like a 2 or 3 minute break.
yeah, it's just like, well,
It
we
bothers.
brought everything to this beautiful crescendo. Now you're telling me we have to add in something else? Like we don't want to do that. We just want to. The show's done. Like we ended it. And like throw in Christmas trees up now, I guess, or whatever. This has that sort of. A lot of them always have that very dismissive kind of vibe to them as well, because they're always silent too. It's always very. But actually, you might actually enjoy them a lot more, Sean, because they're very heavily lean on mine, because it has to be. It's all
Yeah.
silent. So
There's no dialogue. It's all action.
you always will note that you'll see
Pantomime,
the actors
so.
doing very broad sort of gesticulations and stuff because they have to convey what's going on without being able to speak and stuff. So, so
Yeah.
I think you can come back, do your year-long rewatch of nothing but Frasier, and then come back like, I hated all of it except the mime sequences at the end. Those were genius, and I loved every one of them.
I'll just maybe that'll be my next podcast. I just cover the last 30 seconds of every episode of Frasier
Without any context, dude. Just be like, I don't know what happened in the episode, but for some reason now Eddie is drinking out of the toilet bowl, and Frasier chases him out, and Martin appears with a bird cage, and we're like, that's funny, I guess.
That's funny. That's comedy. Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of just that way of ending up shows, I get annoyed because Simpsons does that sometimes. Like most of the times, the way they're aired here in the States, like they cut away. The episode wraps up. They cut away to commercial. They come back and it's just credits. And that's
who's
it.
sticking around for that?
And then, but sometimes they do a gag.
Oh,
Oh,
it's just, I was
sorry.
just like, who comes back for the credits? Like, it feels like they're doing the people who worked on the show a disservice by doing that. Because, like, at least when you're here, you just sit there,
Yeah.
the credits just come, and you're like, all right, I'm seeing the names. But over there, I would be like, oh yeah, well,
Yeah.
now it's done. I'm changing channel. You know?
That's it. Yeah. And yeah, so yeah, sometimes they'll do a bit. Sometimes they'll even have like additional dialogue, like another little scene for 10 or 15 seconds. And then sometimes they'll do, and it's, I mean, maybe a third of the episodes. So I mean, certainly less than half, but occasionally they have like a series of stills, like highlights of some other action that we didn't see. Like a deleted scene from the episode, and they'll just kind of show that under the credits. But they don't do it all the time, so yeah, I'll usually cut out and not hang around for the credits. But yeah, so then we wrap up with we have Eddie jumping up on a table, and he's eating the cookies that were left for Santa, and that's how we end our
Again, you see what I
episode.
mean? It's just like, yeah, that's kind of funny, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, it's cute. The dog getting poisoned. I hope there's no chocolate in those cookies.
I imagine Marty Crane would be sensible enough to be like, no, it's at least there's a chance this
Yeah.
dog's gonna eat those cookies. So
Yeah, I hope so. So that's yeah. So that's there you go. That's Merry Christmas, Mrs. Moskowitz from season 6 of Frasier. So my next question for you, Niall, is as we've discussed with our previous holiday specials, where we've been talking about mostly Christmas movies. A lot of those films become part of yearly traditions, things people watch every year. Maybe they watch it while they're decorating their tree or something. It's part of the celebration is the movie or the special or whatever. Is this an episode that you'll watch every year around Hanukkah, or is this do you think it would be appropriate for this episode to be part of a yearly holiday tradition?
not particularly.
No.
No,
I'm sorry.
yeah,
No, no, yeah.
I think it is aired.
That's-
Like, as I said, because Channel 4 over in the UK, they do show Frasier all the time, like literally every morning. And I'm pretty certain in the lead up to Christmas each year, they kind of break from where the seasons are. Because, obviously they'll air it in sequential order, but they'll break and go, let's air all the Christmas specials. So you probably will see it, like by default, if you're just watching Frasier that week, as part of like their holiday viewing. But that's unfortunately specifically for Christmas though. But then you get like
Yeah.
there's other Frasier Christmas specials that are this. They're very much about Christmas and stuff. Like they'll make a big point, much more than this episode does. Yeah, I don't think they ever. There's mentions of episodes where Frederick shows up. There's always like the Jewish side, but it's always like that's Lil's half and she's not here, so we don't have to deal with it. So no, not particularly.
Right.
I wouldn't say there's I'm sure you've covered much better episodes of other TV shows than with the
Yeah, I have, and I tend to agree, and I think you said earlier, like this, not just a not really a good Hanukkah episode. This is not really a good Christmas episode either.
No.
So I don't see this kind of as something that people would watch. Say, oh, it's that time of year. Bring out the bust out the Frasier.
Yeah. Again, though, there are Frasier Christmas
I'm
episodes
with you
that
on that.
are great, but like the bust out the Merry Christmas, Mr. Moskowitz, like no, I think you slip that one back into the deck.
No. Yeah, I mean, I think as an episode, if you're doing a Frasier rewatch, I wouldn't say skip this one. It's certainly an entertaining episode, but yeah, specifically for the holiday content, I don't think that's really there.
Oh, totally. But still, I think it's still a great episode though. So, and I always enjoy coming on your show, Sean, because basically it started morphing into an excuse for me to talk about a thing that I really want to talk about, but I don't get to talk about on my own shows. So was it like an episode of The Simpsons midnight run, and now Frasier's is like if you start covering like Hannibal or something next year, or Twin Peaks, it's like, geez, Sean, I feel like you're only doing this for me now at some point.
I just listened to Bat Minute to get ideas for a podcast. That's my main main motivation.
The one episode of Twin Peaks that mentions Christmas, we're doing it scene by scene.
Yeah. Is there? I'm sure there's a Christmas episode.
I don't think so, because I think
maybe there's a Hanukkah episode. I gotta look into that.
So, because I think Twin Peaks all happens in sequential, like it's all basically the weeks after Laura Palmer's death. And I think she dies in February. So I don't think there's
Okay.
any. I think
So,
it's always one of those weird things you assume, like, oh yeah, it just goes on and on, but then you find out like the events of all of Twin Peaks take place over the course of like a month or something. You're like, what? It's like that's busy ass months. Jesus Christ.
that's some busy months. Yeah, yeah. All right. So wrapping up. So again, Niall, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your
Oh, anytime,
insight
John. I always enjoy coming
on
Yeah,
Frasier. Yeah, we always enjoy having you. So if our listeners want to hear more from you, as if they didn't know, but just tell them one more
well, I
time
mean,
anyway.
this time, in case people don't know, because mostly people who've heard my previous appearances will know Batman. So my baby, with 4 whole seasons of Batman, which I'm very very proud of. And in next year we'll come back season 5, where we'll be covering Mask of the Phantasm. Batman is of course a show where we analyze the Batman films minute by minute, and Sean has been on each and every season, and hopefully we'll be back for season 5 as well. Uh,
Oh, I'd love to.
but at the
Yeah.
minute, though, we are me and my co-host on Batman, John, are airing Miami Minutes, which is our side hustle, where we're taking a very easygoing and little to no research view and analysis of the 1987 forgotten and then remembered and then now celebrated action craptacular classic that is Miami Connection. Which is to try to explain Miami Connection would be very long-winded. It's just look it up. It's got a fascinating history. Yeah,
Just
and
look it up.
it's a terrible movie, but it's a great movie. It's such a good movie. And so me and John are now that is currently airing. We're by the time this episode comes out, we're probably about like 15, 20 minutes in, because whereas Batman is 3 times a week, Miami Minutes is once a week. Very loosely edited. Very relaxed show. Really, it's just me and John riffing for the entire time. Because of that, there's loads of time. I think there's only like 7 episodes that have aired currently. So if you want to catch up, you got loads of time.
Yeah, it's not too late. Definitely get into that. Yeah, if you haven't seen Miami Connection, definitely check it out. It's something you introduced me. I heard it through you guys talking about it, and I watched it and was. I don't. Religious experience may not be strong enough to describe the experience of.
It's up there with like The Room in
Yeah.
terms of like, well, this thing everyone talks about The Room. People aren't talking about Miami Connection enough, quite frankly. Like it's.
Yeah, it's kind of it shook me to my core. To paraphrase the food critic at the end of Ratatouille. Yeah, definitely check out the Miami Connection and then check out the Miami Minutes. To listen to John and Niall dig into it as they do. And definitely looking forward to the next season. I'm glad to hear that there's going to be a season 5 of the Bat Minute. You could have wrapped it up after 4, but no, you're going to keep on going.
Still always, always really enjoy, but I'll enjoy the research of it and enjoy all the hoopla around it. So Mask of the Phantasm. Plus, it seems so weird to go out and Batman and Robin, particularly because the end credits end on an R. Kelly song. It's like we can't end the show like this.
You can't end the show.
So we have to come back for at least one more season. And why not go out with I think we'll continue beyond Mask of the Phantasm in some form, but if we're going to maybe end the minute by minute format coverage, why not go out with potentially the best Batman movie? So you'll have to hear about that when it starts airing in the upcoming months.
Yeah, so we are all eagerly awaiting that. So and you can find us, of course, we're Next Scene Podcast. We're at nextscenepod.com. Give us feedback. Let me know what's your Frasier history. What's your history with Mrs. Moskowitz? You can join the conversation on our Facebook group. It's the Jelly of the Month Club, and come on back. You mentioned it earlier, Niall. For tomorrow night, for night 3 of Hanukkah, we will be covering Friends, the one with the holiday armadillo. So just stick around for 24 hours, and that'll be our next episode. And so we will see you then on the next scene.
My favorite part is when Superman flew all the Jews out of Egypt.
Egypt.
But I don't know what to do with those tossed salads and scrambled eggs. They're calling again. Happy holidays, everybody!